So if you're here on our channel looking at this video and looking through other Nomad Capitalist videos, you're definitely somebody who is either thinking about moving offshore or you are already there and you want to make things better for yourself, your business, and your whole structure. If that is the case, then this video can definitely point you in the right directions. And some of the things that I'm going to be talking about here today are things that you need to pay attention to when you're moving offshore. My name is Jelena. I'm a strategy manager here at Nomad Capitalist, and we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs go where they're treated best. So we're talking about moving offshore. It definitely kind of can sound easy, right? I mean, get a second residence, open a bank account, open a company, and you're good to go. But in reality, things are much more complicated. In reality, there are many, many steps that you need to go through. And if you're somebody who even try to get, let's say, citizenship by descent, you do understand how bureaucratic and how difficult these processes can be, and how tedious the document collection, notarization, apostille, shipping documents can be. So even if at a first glance it does seem rather straightforward, you think you have all your ducks in a row, there are definitely a kind of a number of things that you need to pay attention to, that you need to structure properly, especially if some of these things that I'm going to be talking about here today apply to you or your situation. Now, if you're somebody who's looking into moving offshore for tax purposes and you're thinking about moving yourself offshore or your company or both things, what most people don't know is that your corporate situation, your business situation, and most of the business tax situation largely depends on your personal tax situation. So if you were to stay in your home country and you establish a business overseas, in most situations that will not help you tax-wise. That business will still be taxed in your home country, you will still be taxed in your home country, and you basically did nothing for tax purposes. Likewise, if your business stays in your home country and you leave, you could tax optimize to an extent. So your business is still going to be taxed in that country where it's incorporated, whether it be Canada, US, Australia. You personally may not be taxed on any, let's say, salary or dividends that you might take from that company, but that tax savings is only partial. Now, if you have a location-independent business, then those tax savings are not significant for you, and they can be maximized further. If you have an on-the-ground business, these situations are much more difficult. You have much more restrictions when it comes to tax savings, and in that situation, you definitely need to consult with somebody in order to structure things properly. So let's say if you decide to move personally and business-wise, you also cannot move to an equally high tax country as your home country. So let's say you're moving from the United States or Canada and you want to move to France or Germany. Those countries are tax aggressive. So if you move to France personally and you establish your business in BVI or Hong Kong or wherever it's tax favorable, but you're in a high tax country, your business may also be taxed in that country based on ownership, based on where the company is controlled and managed. So there are a lot of nooks and crannies that you need to pay attention to when it comes to maximizing maximizing your tax savings and tax optimizing to the fullest. So number one thing you need to pay attention to is that both you and your business depart a high tax country, and that both you and your business arrive at the tax favorable country. Now, this process can be very straightforward if you're the only one involved. However, if you have business partners who are not willing to move, who like where they're living, they are in the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany, whatever high tax country, and they're not willing to move, that might cause additional hassle and issues for you, both tax-wise and otherwise in terms of if you want to restructure your company. That might create additional issues. A lot of countries in the world have controlled foreign corporation rules and permanent establishment rules, and high tax countries really do enforce those. So if you have, let's say, a business partner who is, 50% owner of a certain company and you're a 50% owner, and that person is living in a high tax country with strong controlled foreign corporation rules, your company might be deemed a tax resident in that country where your business partner is living in. You also need to assess the situation with your business partners. You need to see what their goals are, where they want to live, what they want to do, where they want to go, and most importantly, how much percentage of the company they own. As I mentioned, high tax countries have permanent establishment rules, they have controlled foreign corporation rules, and permanent establishment rules tend to be more difficult to bypass, and they tend to be more difficult to navigate through. as they can come in different forms. So it's not just control and management of the company, not just board of directors, where are you located? It's also where are your employees located? And through years of working with different people, many times I've heard situations, they're not employees, they're contractors. And then when you dive deeper into it, you kind of think about, okay, where is their income coming from mostly? Do they have other clients? And you come to a conclusion that you're the only source of their income. They're effectively employees. In many cases, you can call them contractors, but in reality, they are employees. And high-tax countries are going to recognize that, and they're going to enforce that. So if you have employees or contractors, if you want to call them, but not legitimate contractors, in, let's say, I don't know, Germany, France, US, Canada, your company can be, let's say, endangered in a way, in a tax way in those countries, where those countries can claim that you have a tax nexus there and want to tax the portion of your business or majority of your business there, depending on what you're doing and what those people who are working for you are doing in those countries. So the more they're doing, if they're C-level executives, if they have a very significant position in your company, the more tax you are likely to pay in those countries. So even if you decide you want to move offshore, your company's location independent, and you establish yourself in a tax-friendly country and your company's a tax-friendly place, but you still have remaining employees in these high-tax countries, that can create additional hassle and additional issues for you, and you really need to pay attention to that. Relocate those people or employ somebody else or actually have legitimate contractors. Now, another thing that you have to pay attention to before moving and before making this huge jump and before picking a country where you're going to go is what type of income you're receiving. So in certain countries, such as US and Canada, if you're receiving royalties or dividends from those countries, they usually impose withholding tax. Now, that withholding tax is either 25% or 30%. It can be rather significant. Now, this tax is worse for people who are non-resident aliens. So, for example, if you're not a US citizen, but you're receiving royalties from US sources, your withholding tax is going to be 30%. And you can only reduce it by going to a tax treaty country, so a country that has a tax treaty with the United States. So that means that, for example, if you don't think through your situation, you don't analyze it properly, and you, let's say, went to UAE and established yourself there, and you're receiving royalties or dividends from US sources, you will pay 30% tax. Instead, if you go to, let's say, Portugal or Cyprus or any other country that has a tax treaty with the United States, which can help you reduce withholding tax on those sources. The same goes for, let's say, US citizens who have these types of income that can be potentially reduced if you live in a country that has a tax treaty with the United States. So before deciding where you want to move and where you're going to base your business, you first need to look into what type of income you are receiving and whether that type of income requires a double taxation treaty or not. So as most of our viewers know, US citizens have it the worst, basically, because as long as you're a US citizen, you will pay tax. So if you're a US citizen who's planning on leaving your home country for tax purposes, there are limited options for you, basically, in terms of tax savings. And the fact is that you're always going to pay something, right? So as a US citizen, whether you go to Puerto Rico, whether you go offshore and apply for the foreign earned income exclusion, you're always going to pay something. There are certain exclusions, there are certain kind of types of income that you will not pay tax on, but you will never be free of paying tax or reporting obligations as long as you're a US citizen. Now, this doesn't mean that certain other countries have it way easier. Most countries in the world have a tax system which basically deems you a tax resident if you are living in that country, if your family is there, if you have a closer connection there, and you can simply depart that country and establish yourself elsewhere in order to stop paying tax to that country. But certain countries have certain requirements. So for example, if you're a Mexican tax resident who's looking into leaving the Mexican tax net, or you live in Norway and you want to leave Norway for tax purposes, besides the regular things that you have to pay attention to, like how much time you spend there, to eliminate your ties to that country, to have a closer connection somewhere else, there are also additional hassles that you need to go through because these countries have a tighter grip on their tax residents. And that means that if you don't go, for example, for these particular two countries, if you don't go to a country where you are taxed at a certain level, you will still be deemed a tax resident in these countries, for example, Mexico and Norway, for the next 3 years. So if you were to move from, let's say, Mexico to Cayman Islands, because you don't have taxation there, it's going to be zero. Mexico might still deem you a tax resident for the next 3 years, even if you're not there. Same goes for Norway. So they usually require some effective taxation of about, let's say, 22% or more, at least for the first year, in order for you to detach from these tax systems completely. Even if this video kind of gave you a sense that US citizens are definitely the worst, there are definitely other countries that have their own difficulties and that you need to pay attention to, especially if you want to depart those countries. Now, this is the first step that I was talking about previously, and this is you leaving a certain high-tax country. The second part is you arriving to another country, which may be deemed a high-tax country. Now, Portugal is very popular amongst our clients and many expats, where people like the culture, like the foods, they want to live there. But Portugal has its own difficulties, not just Portugal, Spain as well, Italy as well. So they all have certain tax exemptions that can allow you to reduce your taxes, but not necessarily eliminate them. So in Europe, one thing that you need to pay attention to is, first, you will pay something in taxes, you will not pay zero. And secondly, you will not have so much freedom in choosing where the jurisdiction for your company as you would if you were in another tax favorable country. As you can see, in many situations, you can kind of look at things as that everything is easy and nothing is easy. While it seems very straightforward in the beginning, once you actually dive deeper into your situation, you will probably find, if you work with the right people, you will probably find a lot of nooks and crannies. What we found here at Nomad Capitalist is that it is really important to establish things properly from the get-go so that you avoid issues in the future. So if you're somebody who's interested in setting up things properly from the start, then Nomad Capital is definitely somebody who can help you with that, help you establish yourself in tax-friendly countries properly, and addressing all the kind of nooks and crannies that might pop up along the way.